fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got rhythm, both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson! Anderson's up top!
Oh my god! Oh! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled!
Six very close. These guys are going to want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go!
Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
And a very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Laguna Seca in the United States of America for Week 9, Season 4 of the Just Send It iRacing Series. I'm your commentator, Lachlan Mansell, and we've got a new format tonight for the Just Send It series, which we look forward to explaining for you very shortly. Before we do that, though, we've also got a new commentator tonight. He has commentated the Just Send It series in the past, so it's fantastic to welcome him back in alongside me into the commentary box tonight. It's a very good evening to Bo Albert. How are you going, Bo?
I'm going very well because we have a brilliant combination coming up for you tonight. It's the Volkswagen Beetle, and we have a fantastic track to run them at as well in Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. The Corkscrew, I mean, it's pretty much a jump for some of these drivers in most cars, but we've got a car that can handle the jumps as well. And these drivers will be using every bit of that. The dirt, you can use it. The gravel, you can use it. The tarmac, it's there if you really feel like it. But as you can see, the track map coming up on your screen right now. Beautiful Laguna Seca on the west coast in the United States. A beautiful location. And I reckon we've got some brilliant racing coming up today, Lockie.
Let's have a closer look at the circuit, which is one of the iconic venues. Lots of world-famous races have been held at this racetrack over the years. Main overtaking opportunities turn to the Andretti hairpin. Also plenty of camber and undulation changes up around the back part of the circuit, and the very famous big downhill plunge through the Corkscrew at turns 7 and 8, which leads you back into the I suppose the lower elevation section of the circuit, and the other main overtaking opportunity, the final corner at turn number 11. And like you say, we're in the VW Beetle Rallycross cars, so they've got plenty of suspension travel. And even if you venture a little bit off the racetrack, it probably means that they're still going to go okay tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. These cars on iRacing do use the semi-slick compound, so it's actually not a complete off-road tyre. But with that said, they do still have a fair chunk of grip if you're willing to get off the tarmac. So for these drivers, like I said earlier, any little bit of surface you can find on the track, as long as it's not a concrete wall, you can just about use it. And just from what I'm seeing in the practice session here, as he got the slide from one of the Synergy sim racing cars, I could have guessed, I should have guessed, Brenton Hobson absolutely throwing his car around, and he won't be the only one. These cars are equipped with a handbrake as well, so if you get yourself into a tricky situation, the cool thing about these cars, you can rip the handbrake, and if you're actually beginning to oversteer too much, what you can do, keep the handbrake locked on, plant your throttle, the car becomes effectively front-wheel drive. You can correct just about any slide you find yourself in. So for these drivers, if you know how to use these cars, there's almost nothing they can't do with it.
Are we handing out points and scores for the drifting? Because if we are, I'll tell you what, Brenton Hobson gets a 10 out of 10 for me with that exhibition of driving that he's putting on for us at the moment. Probably not the fastest way around the racetrack driving that sideways, but it looks cool, that's for sure. Looking at some of the other drivers in the field, Dylan Golson, who's been one of the consistent runners in the Just Send It series lately, he's in there. Also, Job Stewart, who is currently our unofficial championship leader for Season 4 of Just Send It, and he also comes into this round of the series, Bo, as the most caps driver in the Just Send It series. Across the 3 3/4 seasons that we've had so far, he's chalked up a total of 44 race starts in this series.
And that is actually a very big accolade to have, because of course this series is all about being adaptable. Every week, it's a new car, it's a new track, it's something different to challenge the drivers. So Job Stewart proving just how good he is when it comes to the AusNZ community of racing.
Let's have a look at our grid positions for tonight. Jordan Caruso and Justin Rougier on the front row. Marcello Rivera and James Golding, the second row, back to Job Stewart. Good to see Dylan O'Keefe back tonight. Blake Purdy and Bailey Sweeney. Brock Feeney, the Super 2 driver. The Supercars Endurance co-driver of James Courtney. And then it's Brenton Hobson completing the top 10.
Sliding over to 11th and onwards, Steve Jansen, Jeff Rahali, Andy Carey, Mitch McLeod, and Cam Dance are our top 15. Harrison Dengate, Glenn Postlethwaite, Emerson Harvey, Andrew Collins, and Kobe Williams are top 20.
Back then to Steve Owen, Ben Snell, Jay Cool, Jordan Mulak, Robert Chrisdale, Matt Morris. Continuing down the order because we're just seconds away from a race start here. 2-race format tonight. We'll have a 15-minute sprint race and then a 25-minute feature race that will feature a partial reverse grid, but it's lights out and away we go. And unfortunately, we've already got pandemonium at the start with the car stalling on the grid and half of the field barrel rolling into non-existence.
Now, I've seen a lot of rallycross starts in my days, but that one is right up there, and the crash is still going. In fact, we've still got cars upside down in the end of it all, and it was all James Golding not getting his car off the line, and to his benefit, these cars are actually very, very tricky indeed as the caution flag flies, just for everyone's reference, but these cars are extremely tricky to get off the line. There are so many different ways to do it. With a clutch, a launch control, you've got your line locker as well. First gear, second gear, it all works. Sadly, I think instead of first or second gear, he went for neutral.
Well, we've had pandemonium in plenty of Just Send It races before, but that was epic pandemonium on the start line of that one. Cars piling into one another and obviously a lot of damage. Be interesting to see which drivers actually managed to get through that. But like you said,
down the safety car.
Yeah, like you said, probably a good thing that we do have the safety car out just to allow everybody to tidy each other up. There's Justin Rougier, who started up near the front of the field but has now gone tumbling down the order as a result of that pile-up.
So these drivers, it is 2 races tonight, so it is a slightly unique format, but in this first race we have tonight, it's definitely not been the start a lot of drivers would have been hoping for. I'm just looking through the grid at the moment. The driver the highest up I can see on track right now without damage is around 9th position. So many of these drivers have found themselves in a trouble on this opening lap, which isn't too surprising. Of course, it is only a 15-minute race. Normally, these drivers have 40 minutes plus to find themselves making passes, so they can actually take things just a little bit calmer. Of course, we have seen some big overtakes in this series, but when it gets condensed down to a 15-minute first sprint race, that's where you see these drivers going for risks, and I think we saw a little bit of that there.
Apparently the safety car's out, but obviously it was deployed pretty much immediately, so it's just taking the drivers a bit of time here to catch up with where the safety car is. We are expecting that everybody will have to make a pit stop in this race, and one of the things that we know about iRacing is that when the safety car is first deployed, the pit lane entry actually closes, so when the pit opens on the second lap of this safety car intervention, I think you can expect most of the field to come diving in to get their pit stops out of the way. Jordan Caruso, your race leader, ahead of Job Stewart, Dylan O'Keefe, Brock Feeney, and Marcello Rivera completing the top 5 at this stage.
Yeah, so quite a few drivers making a lot of moves there, and you can see actually one of the drivers who Jordan Caruso unable to pass due to the safety car rules, and actually we have Job Stewart and Dylan O'Keefe diving into the pit lane here while Jordan Caruso elects to stay out. Now, I do find that a little bit interesting because, yes, these cars do have a very small fuel tank in the form of just 28 litres, but 28 litres, in my mind at least, should be able to get you to the end of this 15-minute race. So to see so many drivers, including the likes of Job Stewart and James Golding now and a couple of others diving into the pits is actually quite surprising to me.
It'll be interesting to see if the drivers who've stayed out on the racetrack are able to make it. Having a look at some of the social media chat that was going on before this race, it was expected that everybody would have to do a pit stop during this race and potentially 2 pit stops in the longer feature race that we've got coming up a bit later on. So it'll be interesting to see how strategically this all plays out. But amazing that in a race that's only 15 minutes long, that there are some drivers who are thinking that it's a good idea to make a pit stop.
Well, yeah, it all just comes down to the very small fuel tank in these cars, of course, just 28 litres, not much at all. And this circuit for these cars, which are running a lot longer gearing than they normally would be, is still a long time on full throttle. So there would be a very high fuel burn rate. But for these drivers, I think those that stayed out, if I was in this race, I think that'd be the call I'd be making too. So right now, I think the likes of Caruso, Feeney, Rivera, Sweeney, Owen, Ford, and a whole bunch of other drivers, right down to Job Stewart, who comes out in 9th position. I think they're the drivers that have made the right call, and everyone else back, I think they've just hurt themselves track position-wise.
Be interesting to see how it all plays out, but not too much longer before we get a restart. The lights are out on the safety car. The cars that are a lap down are getting the opportunity to go round and get themselves back onto the lane lap, as is the protocol under safety cars in iRacing. So safety car pulls into the pits and we're back underway. It's Jordan Caruso yet to take a pit stop, who needs to make the most of the clear track and problems back in the pack for Dylan O'Keefe. He's cleaned up the bollard there on the apex of turn 11, the final corner, and a huge moment. That was Steve Owen having a big rotation ahead of Chris Owen and getting cleaned up by another car as well.
Yep, ripped the handbrake into turn 1. Sadly, it was a little bit all too much as Job Stewart finds himself in a scrap with Mitch McLeod. They're going to go side by side now into the fast right-hander. Stewart on the inside and commandingly takes the position, but Mitch McLeod not going to let him get away without it, without a little parting gift there, as Job Stewart now will be hunting down Jeff Rahali in front. But all the while that Job Stewart has to find a way past these cars, the likes of Jordan Caruso and Brock Feeney up front just skipping away a little bit.
Yeah, the drivers who are at the front of the pack, the fact that there's all of this congestion behind them and cars battling over position, it's going to allow the race leaders to put their heads down and to be able to pull away. Brock Feeney holding station there in second position, just ahead of Marcello Rivera. At this stage, the highest place of the cars to have taken a pit stop is Job Stewart, who sits in 7th position. There he is on screen at the moment.
Yep, and he's making some very good lap speed at the moment as well. You can see visually catching the cars in front, looking at Jordan Mullock there, who finds himself getting dive bombed up the inside there. A very aggressive move back there for what is 13th and 14th place at the moment. You see it's Matt Morris on the outside trying to make something happen. He's in the gravel, trying to get the better exit speed. It hasn't hurt him too much, but the Red Bull sponsored car does have the slight advantage now. But we'll see what happens as they get to the braking zone at the end of this long front straight. Looks to the inside. Does Matt Morris not close enough? Oh, never mind. He was a little bit too close in the end and pushes the Red Bull car off the track.
One of the things that was mentioned as well on social media is that while the rules have generally been fairly lenient in just send it in the past, there is actually race control tonight, and they will actually hand out drive-through penalties if they feel like overtaking manoeuvres are a little bit too aggressive or ambitious. And I reckon that they might just be having a look at some of these incidents that are happening in the mid-pack at the moment, like that one, because nose-to-tail contacts between cars is generally not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the general gist of the post was just to say that these drivers, you know, we're allowing a little bit of leniency when it comes to this racing. You can biff and barge just a little bit. Any intentional takeouts or purposely pit maneuvering a driver to get a position, well, that is not going to win you any favors. And we are seeing some drivers actually getting removed from the server right now. So obviously we do like the biff and barge nature of this series, but we also want it to be fun racing for all. And getting taken out on purpose is not fun for anybody.
No, I couldn't agree with you more on that one. One of the things I'm noticing about these cars, Bo, is you can tell just how soft the suspension is. And one of the places where you really see it is under brakes into the corners, just how much nosedive there is on these cars. You can really see the front end dipping down when they brake hard for some of the turns.
Absolutely, of course. These cars used to running through really rough ruts and all the kinds of bad dirt surfaces in the rallycross surface. And of course, jump landings as well. And we're going to forget about that because Steve Owen has had an absolutely monumental accident on the front straight at pit exit involving multiple cars there. Andrew Collins has found himself in a very bad spot as well. And am I correct in saying that Jordan Caruso might have been... No, it wasn't Jordan Caruso, just the timing screen playing up. But was that for an impact? Absolutely horrific scenes for Andrew Collins, completely unsighted over the crest.
Poor Andrew Collins, there was absolutely nothing that he could have done about that because Steve Owen came out of the pit exit directly back onto the racing line. We look out the back of Brock Feeney's car. He's battling side by side with Bailey Sweeney over what will be positions 2 and 3 in the race, and Brock Feeney's diving into the pits, so doesn't have enough fuel obviously to get to the end, and he's having to come in for a splash.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll see how that affects some of the other drivers that did stay out, including Jordan Caruso, who hasn't decided to dive into the pits just yet. Mitch McLeod also thinking that he doesn't quite have the fuel to make it to the end, and that's interesting because, of course, he was another driver to stay out. And Dylan O'Keefe, what do I say about that?
It looks like he just misjudged his position on the racetrack there, so he was pulling out to overtake the car that was just ahead. I think was that Matt Morris, and he's clipped the inside wall and it sent him firing back across the racetrack, and that's a shame for Dylan O'Keefe because on strategy he was looking good for potentially a top 3 result in the race. Looks like he's managed to get going again.
One thing I do have to say about these cars, I've done my fair share of races in them, as my car just rejoins right in front of our race leader there. You might see it on the onboard here as we look at Bailey Sweeney, that car there just rejoining at the worst possible moment, almost took out the race leader. But the contact physics of this car can be a little bit wonky at the best of times, and instead of pushing another car when contact is made, they almost have a tendency to bounce each other off in terms of contact. And Jordan Caruso now dives for the pits, so again, drivers thinking they don't have enough fuel, so this may give the effective race lead now all the way back to Job Stewart, currently running 5th, but it's very soon about to be 1st.
Yep, because Marcello Rivera and Jeff Rahali have both pitted as well, so that leaves Bailey Sweeney as the leader of the race, but yet to pit. And check that out, Marcello Rivera down the inside of Jeff Rahali at pit entry. They're already into the pit entry part just before you make that really hard left-hander to turn onto pit road, and Rivera saw that as an overtaking opportunity.
Well, there is actually quite a lot of overtaking opportunities in the pit lane itself here, because these cars actually don't feature a pit limiter as well. So it's all about how the driver can control their speed down the pit lane. And if one car is doing 70 kilometers an hour down the pits and another driver is doing 71 kilometers an hour in the pits, well, that is eventually going to end up to an advantage of almost a second through the pit lane. So that is something you definitely want to keep your eye on. One driver that might have got that balance in terms of going fast in the pit lane a little bit wrong is actually Jordan Caruso with a very slow stop.
Indeed, so he was stationary for 8.5 seconds and spent 30.4 seconds in pit lane, which is a bit slower than some of the other cars, as we've got more incidents in Quast. This is a bit further back. This is up at the corkscrew and rejoining the racetrack head on with the big pack of cars approaching.
Yeah, and I think he might have been one of the drivers that got involved at that corkscrew and actually almost made contact with Job Stewart, who now has a little bit of damage to the front of his car. So Job has to be a little bit wary of that these lap drivers are really throwing the car around here at Laguna Seca today, and it's getting a little bit messy at the best of times.
So here's Bailey Sweeney. He's just taken his pit stop, so that will leave Job Stewart as the race leader ahead of Jordan Mulak, who's come up really well. He was outside the top 10 at the start of this race, but through a combination of good racecraft and avoiding some of the incidents, he's worked his way all the way up into 2nd position. Just wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Jordan as well. He messaged me before the broadcast and wanted me to make mention of the fact that he's running as a privateer at the moment, but is looking for a race team to align himself with. So if there's any sim racing teams that want a good solid pair of hands, Jordan Mulak might just be your man.
Well, he's definitely doing a very good job. Like you said, 22 spots higher than where he qualified, which is a great effort. Another person we have to make mention of is on my timing screens. In 5th place currently, Tyson McAvoy. He's found himself up 33 spots from where he qualified, which is an absolutely unbelievable effort.
We're watching the battle for positions 2, 3, 4 and 5 at the moment. So Mulak there in position 2. He's got Jordan Caruso right behind him, Emerson Harvey and Tyson McAvoy both with the bird's eye view of this battle that's going on, and it's going to be Caruso to the outside of Mulak through the second to last corner. Caruso moves up into second position.
Yep, plenty of changing off positions at the moment, so Mulak is going to have to try and find something a little bit extra if he's going to get that spot back. But nonetheless, we'll see what he can do in the battle of the Jordan, second and third currently. As you can see, another driver going for a very big entry into the pit lane here as we are near on the final lap. 30 seconds remaining on the clock, but only one lap remaining here at Laguna Seca. 3.6 kilometers, 11 turns, but far from easy at the moment. Joe Stewart, though, looking all kinds of in control.
And a heap of cars have just come into the pits, so clearly some of the drivers that stopped early under that safety car didn't have enough fuel range from that point to be able to get to the finish. So a few drivers running very marginal on fuel as we look at Jordan Mulak being overtaken on the outside by Bailey Sweeney and being relegated back to fourth position. Job Stewart with a lead of 4.2 seconds over Jordan Caruso. And on target at the moment, Job Stewart for another race victory. He's already got 2 to his credit in the Just Sentence series, so this will be race win at number 3 for the Pursuit Sim Racing driver.
Yes, indeed. He has actually lost quite a lot of time on this last lap. When he started the final lap, it was a 11-second lead, and the gap is now standing at just over a second, and he's getting awfully slow. So I'm wondering if this is just how fuel critical Job Stewart was, but he was fuel saving right to the very end of the race. But nonetheless, he has the fuel as he coughs and spits across the line to take victory in race number 1 of 2 tonight. Jordan Caruso will end up finishing in second with Bailey Sweeney in third, stealing it away at the very last lap as unfortunately Jordan Mulak lost a whole heap of ground there.
Indeed, he did. He got dropped back to 6th position there at the finish. I reckon there might have been an incident just before the finish line there as well, because there are cars parked in all sorts of weird angles just past the start-finish line. Let's take a look at some replays of what happened here at the finish. We're looking at Emerson Harvey, who... Did he cop a hit in the last corner? Yes, he did. So he got turned around, and then because he'd slowed up, there were other cars coming through out of that last corner that didn't realise that he had slowed up. I reckon that Jordan Mulak might have run out of fuel just over the finish line there as well, because they got rear-ended too. So the race started in chaotic circumstances, the race finished in chaotic circumstances, and the race had chaotic circumstances pretty much right the way through. Now, one of the features tonight, Bo, is that we do have a reverse grid format for our second race, and that means we bring out the Wheel of Fortune to work out how many positions the guy can get reversed. So we'll spin up the wheel. Our producer Jay Kennedy in the background, and it's going to stop on number 14. So 14 positions will be reversed for race 2. Is that based on the finishing positions from race 1, or is it based on qualifying?
I believe that's based on the results from race number 1. So if that is the case, Lockie Dalton has just found himself in pole position. So well done to Lockie, who will start from pole in race number 2. But we'll go and have a look at our race results from the first race, and in the end it was Job Stewart taking the win, just 1.6 seconds ahead of Jordan Caruso and Bailey Sweeney, who took third on the final lap. Jeffrey Hartley gets fourth ahead of Brock Feeney. Mitch McLeod gets sixth, with Jordan Mulak losing a fair few positions on the final lap to come home in seventh. Marcello Rivera in eighth, Ben Snell in ninth, and Cam Dance finishes in the top 10.
Outside the top 10, Tyson McAvoy 11th, Chris Owen 12th, Matt Morris, and then a Lockie Dalton, who will be your pole sitter for race 2. Brenton Hobson 15th, ahead of Brenton West, and Dylan O'Keefe, who was in the thick of the action in that one. Kobe Williams and Robert Crisdale, and then Emerson Harvey completing the top 20.
Jason King in 21st, Steve Jansen 22nd, with Harrison Dengate, Mark Wicks, and Dylan Goulson your top 25, a minute off your race winner at the end of it all. Christina Nazarek in 26th, Michael Smith crossing in 27th, Glenn Postlethwaite, a bit of a loser in that race, unfortunately for him, in 28th, Tim Mitchell in 29th, and our lap down drivers start from here, kicked off by Justin Rougier in 30th.
Yep, plenty of drivers who finished a lap or more down. Joel Chigavazira, back to Dwayne Priest, Mauro Vatanian, Jackson Griffith, Andrew Collins, Aidan Brand, Ryan Ullman, James Close, Jordan Ford, and then Hayden Veld in 40th position.
Eddie Beswick would round out in 41st ahead of Oscar Target, Andy Carey. James Golding had a tough race in that one after stalling on the grid of all things. Eden Quas in 45th, Lockie Hughes 46th, Blake Purdy, Jay Cool, Damien Westbrook, Jackson Barry would be a top 50.
And then the final finishes Steve Owen, Logan Dockett, Daniel Aish, Michael Bullman, Will Newell, and Justin Howe. Big field of cars tonight. That's the sprint race done and dusted. The feature race not too far away here on the SimSpeed TV network as we reverse our top 14 positions from race 1 and we get ready for a 25-minute feature.
Yes, indeed. Well, obviously, sprint races usually the more chaotic of the two in general racing terms. So hopefully in this next race, which is going to be just a little bit longer as well, and like we've alluded to, possibly needing a second pit stop just to make the finish as well, we'll have a bit more strategy, and hopefully, I know this is doubtful, but hopefully we can get a little bit more close and clean action in.
Just getting a few messages through on social media from a few competitors. Dylan O'Keefe has messaged me and he said that he pitted under the safety car in that race while he was in third position, took that opportunity to get some damage fixed, but then he had to pit with a lap to go because he didn't have enough fuel. I only had to put 1 litre in his second pit stop to be able to make it to the checkered flag.
Very, very unfortunate there for Dylan O'Keefe. He'd end up 17th in the first race there, but of course losing a whole bunch of ground, so not ideal after pitting under the first safety car. But for some of these drivers, it was a fuel conservation race in the end, and I was surprised to see that the drivers who didn't pit under the first safety car couldn't make it, and then again, the drivers that did pit under the first safety car, they only just made it coughing across the finish line.
So fuel saving definitely going to be a factor. The reason that we've got a bit of a break in proceedings is we just need our series organisers to configure the iRacing server and make sure that we've got the correct number of positions inverted for race number 2, which will be a longer 25-minute duration, and therefore we are expecting, because of the small fuel tank capacity on these cars, that everybody is going to have to make 2 pit stops. How do you see things panning out in this second race, Bo?
Well, fingers crossed we can get a little bit more strategy, because of course we saw them having to make 1 pit stop to make 15 minutes. So 2 pit stops should last 30 minutes, which then means there's about 5 minutes of leeway. Just play with strategy a little bit. Pit a lap early here, pit a lap later there. Hopefully could make the difference in a bit of track position, and in the end results, just pick things up a little bit more, because we're going to need something, because at the moment, Job Stewart looks in fantastic form. Jordan Caruso had very good pace in that last race. Maybe this is his chance just to get a little bit of redemption and maybe beat Job Stewart in the next one. But for these drivers, you've got to be fast, you've got to stay out of trouble and strategize. There's a lot more to think about in this next one compared to our sprint race just then.
So just a few stats to update you on. So that was Job Stewart's 3rd race victory in the Just Send It series. That ties him with Cody Birch, Josh Rogers, Brenton Hobson, and Blake Purdy on the winners list. It also moves him up to equal 3rd on the list of drivers with the most podiums, tying him up with Cody Birch on 10 podium finishes in Just Send It. The driver with the most podium finishes is Cooper Webster with 15, closely followed by Jackson Suzlin Harlow with 14. So I'll tell you what, as I mentioned, this is his 45th and 46th races that Job Stewart is contesting tonight in the Just Send It series. To have, what's that, a 1 in 4.5 strike rate of finishing on the podium? Not a bad effort.
Pretty incredible when you think about it, isn't it? Of course, that is absolutely insane, the fact that the amount of variables and different strategy in cars and tracks that go into this. It's always eventually going to specialize for one driver. There might be one driver who is very, very good in NASCARs, and if we get a NASCAR event, you'd expect them to potentially win or at least do very, very well. But for Job Stewart, it doesn't matter what car it is or what track it is. He seems to be able to find a knack to eventually get the car to the checked flag in the fastest time. And I think for anybody, we all respect how quick Job is. But the thing you've really got to respect about him is the adaptability. He seems flawless.
I agree with you 100% on that point, and I've always said that one of the hallmarks of a good driver, whether it be in real life or on the sim track, is the ability to adapt between different car and track combinations and to be fast regardless of what car you're driving or what track you're on. And we've seen that Job Stewart's had lots of success in lots of different sim racing categories. We saw that he won the Speed Cafe GT3 A-Series Championship quite comprehensively. We've seen that he's had a lot of success in the Just Send It series, and that applies to the likes of Cooper Webster and Jackson Suzel and Harlow as well. The ability to jump between different types of cars with different handling characteristics and be competitive regardless of what they're racing.
It really does prove just which drivers are the best in their element. Of course, there's always going to be a driver that can do well in one thing or the other, but it's those top drivers that can extract the speed out of anything. And like you say, it's the Cooper Websters, the Job Stewarts, the Susan Harlows. They're the very impressive drivers that can make it happen in just about anything. So it is a real credit to them that they are able to do it every single week, because it's not just, a chance where they get to practice in the new car or new track over the week. They're finding out just an hour or day before the event takes place. So it really is just how quick you are on your feet to learn something new. And I think that really just speaks volumes for them.
So not too long before we get going for the feature race here tonight for Just Send It. What we're going to do right now, though, is grab a break here on SimSpeed TV. Race number 2, not too far away.
is rolling out for the start of today's 400-lap race on this .625-mile racetrack. Here's the starting lineup. On the pole from Dawsonville, Georgia, in the number 9 Coors Ford qualifying and Winston Cup race from North Wilkesboro is underway. Everybody nicely through turns number 1 and 2 as Bill Elliott has the lead and Dale Earnhardt has jumped into second position, followed by Benny Parsons and Bobby Allison.
Georgia, Bill Elliott straining car number 9 to bring it home. 10 car lengths. Bill Elliott, 2-time winner of the Great American Race.
On the out of fuel, Bill Elliott and Dale Earnhardt is going to win the Trans-South 500, his second win of 1987.
It's going to be a battle for second. Bill Elliott is
fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got rhythm, both of them! Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up top now.
Oh my god! Big crash! Oh my goodness, half the field's gonna get rolled.
Six very close. These guys are going to want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no! That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?
Welcome back, everybody, to SimSpeed TV, where you are watching Week 9, Season 4 of the just ended iRacing series. Apologies for a bit of a delay in proceedings in getting ourselves set for race number 2. Some slight technical issues at the back end with getting the server configured for this race. It's Lockie Madsell in the commentary box along with Bo Albert. And Bo, the news for this second race, which will be the 25-minute feature race, is that due to having to reconfigure the server, we're now going to have a completely randomised grid.
Absolutely. So even the drivers themselves, who are currently doing some practice laps out on track, have no idea where they're going to be starting for this next race. So the plan was, of course, for this second race, have a top 14 inverted. So it would have been, I believe, Dalton, who would have been starting from the pole position. But unfortunately, like you say, just due to technical difficulties, the entire field from head to toe completely randomized. So even as commentators right now, we can't say who was on pole.
No, it'd be interesting to see how the grid positions shake out. But like you say, the driver's out there for a practice session that has 5 minutes remaining at the moment. Your race number 1 winner was Job Stewart. And he had to do a lot of fuel saving towards the back end of that race. He was one of the drivers who opted to pit under the safety car that came out on lap 1. And that meant that in order to get to the finish from that point of the race, you had to save a lot of fuel. We saw some drivers actually had to come in for a second pit stop with just over a lap remaining to ensure that they could get to the checkered flag. And because of the small fuel tank capacity and the fact that these cars are pretty thirsty, we are anticipating that everybody is going to have to do 2 pit stops in this 25-minute feature race.
Absolutely, and the thing is, with those 2 pit stops, is they will probably more than likely have a little bit of leeway as to when they actually end up taking their pit stop. So even though it will be a 2-stop race more than likely, you do have that margin for if you want to undercut some drivers, if you want to go for an overcut slightly. So that will work out to a pretty exciting race, I think. So I am looking forward to this 25-minute race, especially with drivers having to do things slightly differently to how they normally would. Because, of course, you might have a fast driver. Let's use Joe Stewart as an example. He might be starting 40th and last in this race coming up. So he might then have to change his strategy entirely from what he had planned originally. And he might go for an undercut, try and get track position that way.
I think one of the big things, and we saw a lot of it in race number 1, is that if you can stay out of trouble and avoid damage and avoid getting caught up in any incidents, then you're going to end up finishing fairly high up the order. We saw that there were a lot of incidents. How was that start line incident that we saw in race number 1 when James Golding failed to get off the line, and that caused a massive pile-up of cars, some salting into midair because of the fact that Golding's car was parked stationary on the main straight.
Well, I'm a little bit worried at the moment because it is practice underway right now, and I'm watching James Golding, and he is super fast, currently the fastest driver in our practice session right now, but I haven't seen him do a single practice start, so I'm hoping his fortunes can be a little bit better in his second race, because as I alluded to before the first race, these cars, there is a number of different ways you can get these cars off the line. They're extremely difficult. And in actual rallycross racing itself, the start is about 50% of your race result, such as the very fast nature of the feature and heat races in rallycross. So for these drivers, anyone who has ended up practicing their start, knows the procedure, knows what they're doing, that is a big advantage. And for someone like James Golding, well, the goal is just to engage first gear in this next one.
Just explain to us the start procedure in one of these cars, because you were talking before about the fact that the cars have V8 supercar style line lockers and a few other aids just to make it, I suppose, a bit easier and a bit more user friendly to get these cars off the line.
Absolutely. So these cars do have a bunch of different features to get off the line, but the primary way most drivers, I think, will be getting these cars off the line is simply holding it in neutral and then getting your RPM to the correct range, because they do have launch control. So you can set exactly where you want your RPM on the start line. It'll be anywhere between 6,000 and 7,000 RPM. And that will obviously control how much wheel spin you will have initially on your launch. But for the most part, drivers, full throttle, get the car on the launch control, and then engage first gear, and away you can go. But of course, there's different ways you can go as well. My personal procedure, what I use for Rallycross, involves first gear, the line locker, and launching on about half throttle as well. So there is a lot of different variables on how you get these cars off the line. But the primary thing is where you've got your RPM limit set, which I believe these drivers actually cannot change due to the fixed setup of this series. So they're all locked onto, I think, 6,000 RPM off the launch. And then from there, it's all in your right foot and how you manage that wheel spin.
Some burnouts happening here on the exit of turn number 1. Mitchell McLeod, I might have guessed.
Who else would it be? Let's be honest.
We were having a chat to Mitchell during the break in between races, thoroughly enjoying the just centered competition as he always does. Has quite a healthy following on Twitch as well, so no doubt all of his Twitch fans tuning in, watching him in action tonight. Another one of the drivers from regional Victoria, Glenn Postlethwaite, was on screen there as well. Mitchell McLeod has actually blown that car up, so he'll be headed back to the pits for some repairs before the start of race 2.
Well, it's a good thing he's decided to do it in the practice and not in the race that is coming up in just a few moments' time. And Oscar Target having one decent-sized shunt there as well, and a bit of wall riding to boot as well. We have another driver doing burnouts in the pit lane as well. So these drivers who did unfortunately have a little bit of a lengthy delay in between the two races are just getting their frustrations out and having a bit of fun as well. But the checkered flag now flies, and in a matter of moments' time, we will get our very first glimpse at what the qualifying order will be for the next 25-minute race coming up.
Anything could happen here, but very interesting to see what the grid positions are that we end up with. Here we go. Jordan Caruso on pole ahead of Marcello Rivera, Blake Purdy. There's actually some pretty high-quality names up the front here. Cameron Dance, Andy Carey, Brenton Hobson in 6th. Job Stewart, our race 1 winner, in 7th position ahead of Steve Jansen, Simon Black, and then Glenn Postlethwaite rounding out your top 10.
Cody Williams will kick things off from 11th. Jeff Harley in 12th. Mario Vartanian in 13th. Ruben Goodall and Mitch McLeod, your top 15, with Eddie Beswick, David Deeth, Dylan Goulson, Jackson Barry, and Hayden Veld, your top 20.
Over the page, we go back to Matt Morris, Joel Chigavazira, Byron Phillips in 23rd position, followed by Mark Wicks, Tyson McAvoy, Robert Crisdale, Emerson Harvey, James Golding in 28th position, Jordan Mulak back in 29th, and Harvey Price completing the top 30. So, our grid is set, and we are set for a start here. This is race 2, week 9, season number 4 of the Just Centered iRacing series. And I reckon that might be a jump start there from the car that was starting from the outside of the front row. Marcello Rivera just a little bit too eager to get off the line there, but thankfully it looks like we've avoided any cars stalling on the grid. Still a couple of them wide and off the circuit as they head down into turn number 2 on this opening lap, but not the mass pandemonium that we saw at the start of race 1.
Oh, it's almost starting at turn number 3. Then we had Cam Dance in all kinds of trouble, very sideways across the track into the likes of Job Stewart and a bunch of cars off the road. And you got more trying to rejoin now. One car on its lid, to say the least, as well. It's turn number 4, where things will go haywire in Just Send It race number 2 today. Lots of contact. We've got about 4 or 5 wide into turn number 5, involving Emerson Harvey, Christina Nazarick, and Cam Dance as well. So a busy start for the New Zealander as chaos reigns through the end of the field. But out front, it is going to be the driver of Marcello Rivera, but he will have a very, very large penalty looming over his car.
Indeed he will, because they went way too early there at the start. I spoke a bit too soon though, didn't I? Brenton Hobson now on his side as well. I said that we avoided the mass pandemonium on the start-finish straight, but it unfolded at turn number 3 instead. Here's a look at what happened to Hobbo, who started the race out of his traditional 6th position on the grid. And Job Stewart has just run a little bit wide. There was another car there as well. Bang! Mitchell McLeod. Brenton Hobson left with nowhere to go there and ends up on his lid.
Mitch McLeod did blow his engine in practice, and how you practice is often how you race. And well, sadly, he has practiced exactly how he's raced, and not ideal for Mitch there with a blown engine. As you can see, just the sheer amounts of chaos is unrivaled, but we have a fight for your race lead, Rivera, despite the penalty, not giving this up against Caruso side by side and around the outside. If you don't mind, Jordan Caruso takes over from the front.
We saw that Jordan Caruso was very quick in qualifying earlier on, and he was also punching out some very quick lap times in race 1. So Jordan Caruso on a mission at the moment, and takes Rivera on the outside. That was a nice move there from Jordan Caruso, the driver who races sports sedans in real life.
Got a nice little battle pack shaping up at the moment between Jeffrey Harley, Glenn Postlethwaite, and Job Stewart as they get all kinds of feisty into the corkscrew chicane. Glenn Postlethwaite, someone who, when Rallycross first debuted, was a very, very fast peddler indeed. Knew exactly how to get one of these cars around a track. At the moment, just coming under a bit of pressure, though, from Job Stewart, who started out of the 7th grid slot, currently sitting in 6th, looking for 5th. Final corner, though, isn't going to be an opportunity.
And already a pit stop taking place there. That'll be Marcello Rivera. And is that for a stop-go or drive-through penalty? Because that's a very early pit stop. Could actually be that he's just taking the opportunity to take one of his scheduled pit stops, but we'll wait for confirmation of that.
That would, I believe, just be the penalty for the jump start that he did have, unfortunately. So not ideal there as Mitch McLeod rejoins the race. Sadly, a lap down right in front of Jeffrey Harley there. And Mitch not showing any signs of giving an easy way past for Harley, who was doing a good job in 3rd off the start of this race. And Mitch does now slide across and allow the very colourful Beetle through. And Job Stewart, though, closing on both of them. So a very close race coming up. And in fact, Marcelo Rivera has called it a night as well. So much pace for him. I believe actually a pole sitter in the actual qualification session, but unfortunately the results did not come in the race today, so Marcelo would be very upset with that. Not probably as upset as Dylan Goulston, though, who I believe has just had his race ended.
Copped a big tag there, didn't he? Dylan Goulston. Was that Job Stewart, or was that one of the other Pursuit Sim racing cars? It was Ruben Goodall running the same livery as Job Stewart, who's got into the back of Dylan Goulston there and turned him around just on that left-hander there as you head up the hill, turn number 6. So that leaves Jordan Caruso as your race leader by 4.2 seconds over Blake Purdy. Job Stewart sitting in 3rd position. Jeffrey Harley, Glenn Postlethwaite, your top 5. Jordan Caruso, of course, one of the drivers for Brenton O'Brien's Evolution Racing team.
And at the moment, we have Hayden Veld in 6th position, which is from 20th on the grid. So he's up 14 spots at the moment, which is an amazing effort there from Hayden. Obviously had a very good result last time out in Scops. In split number 2, I believe, ended up finishing in 3rd or so. So he's a very, very fast driver. Just does not put the practice time in that he probably needs to at times, speaking from what he's been telling me. And unfortunately for Hayden, that practice time is hurting him again as Steve Jansen slides up the inside and steals 6th spot away and immediately dips the car off into the dirt as well. So Steve definitely hanging it out a bit, trying to get some lap time out of these cars and using all kinds of surfaces, as Hayden Feld actually gets a very big tap from Jimmy in position number 8 at the moment, who of course was the cause of a very large accident in race number 1.
He's got good pace in this race, though, James, setting some very quick lap times at the moment. Cameron Dance on his lid. Ruben Goodall trying to give him a bit of a hand, get back onto all 4 wheels, but not able to do so.
I wish there was some way we could hear from Cam Dance right now, just to get one word to describe what exactly happens there. A massive hit from him, unfortunately, ending up on his lid. And you can see there, just he was a bit of a bystander in that. Not much he can do. Just wrong place, wrong time. But I've got to say, not sure about the rejoin, though.
Not sure if we do want to hear one word from Cameron Dance, because I'm pretty sure that the one word that he would have uttered after that incident would not be appropriate for broadcast. Jeffrey Harley in position number 5, getting up the inside of Glenn Postlethwaite. So that moves Harley up into 4th spot. Postlethwaite getting relegated back to 5th position at this stage. Just having a look a bit further down the order, so Christina Nazarick and Lockie Dalton have both taken stops and contact. Rahali
big
and
crash.
Postwaite.
Yeah, Rahali and Postwaite, they were coming together, and when you could see that happening a couple of corners in advance, they were beginning to lean on each other quite a lot, and it all got a little bit too much, and you can see almost a pit maneuver there. Postwaite hard into concrete, and Rahali came off almost no better. So two drivers there involved in all kinds of drama, and McLeod, an innocent bystander there. Of course, he was a lap down anyway, but that is not how he would have liked that little transgression to go.
Big winner out of all of that was James Golding, because they basically got 3 spots for the price of none then. Just drove straight past the cars that was spearing off in front of him, and he's now up to position 4, James Golding, so he's made very good progress up through the field. The other driver who's come charging up the order, Jordan Mulak, we saw a similar performance from him in race 1 where he came from outside the top 10. Well, he's come from 29th on the grid up to 7th, Jordan Mulak, so he's flown up the order.
Absolutely, some big movers and shakers in this race. In fact, I believe the biggest mover and shaker is actually James Golding, along with Aiden Brand and Justin Howe, both on, well, all of those 3 drivers on 24 spots gained since the start. So those drivers that are being able to stay out of trouble and just hit their lines and make some passes happen when they need to, they're getting some big rewards right now, which is fantastic to see.
Jordan Mulak in a pretty robust contest here with Emerson Harvey, who gave him a big tap a couple of corners prior, but he was able to hold onto it. But Harvey up the inside, Vartanian and Matt Morris, the next 2 drivers, lining up for a shot at the Red Bull livery Rallycross VWB, who are being driven by Jordan Mulak, who normally we see behind a keyboard writing articles for the touringcartimes.com website, and their coverage of Australian and international touring car racing. Here's the battle a bit further up. So there's a good contest happening for positions 2 and 3 at the moment between Job Stewart and Blake Purdy, 2 of the veterans of the Just Send It series. But they're now more than 7 seconds adrift of our race leader, Jordan Caruso, who has put his head down and has been punching out fast laps.
Yeah, absolutely. And last lap around, it was Jordan Caruso who was the fastest car on track, pulling away some 0.6 of a second ahead of Job Stewart, who was 0.2 of a second slower than Blake Purdy behind. So Blake Purdy putting in a great effort at the moment to hang on to the back of the Pursuit Sim Racing driver just ahead of him, and he is going to get himself into a great spot. But they've got to both be careful, because James Golding, well, he was 0.3 of a second quicker than them both. So Golding is flying, and Jordan Mulak has a great little look now at the back of the car in front of Jeff Rahali. That's a very tricky spot to make a pass happen. He thought about it, couldn't make it happen though, but the exit was stellar, and we'll see what kind of run he can get into the fast kink. You want to set yourself up wide and then get a really nice slingshot out of that corner, build the speed up, and Rahali getting a slide is only going to help the momentum of Jordan Mulak, who goes side by side, forced to back out of it just about, so there wasn't contact, but there was almost so close contact, and that could have been race defining into the corkscrew, but they both survived, they both push on, but Mario Vartanian and Matt Morris have now both found themselves involved in this scrap.
And all of our race leaders coming in this time around. So Caruso, Stewart, Purdy, Golding, all of these cars coming in. So this is a sign that, what are we up to? Just over 10 minutes into the race, everybody's out of fuel at this point. So the fact that you've got such a bulk, I suppose, visitation to pit lane at this stage, it's a sign that everybody's run out of fuel. So everybody having to come in all at the same time.
And we do actually have a couple of drivers now taking tyres, and that's interesting because this car is not designed for pit stops in the real world. So these tyre changes do actually take a fair bit of time as well. So it's not like your regular race car, a GT3 or so, where it can be done and over in 28 seconds. These do take close to a minute for a full set of tyres change. And I think a couple of those drivers have changed one tyre, realised it was a mistake, and then bailed out. So they've got 1 new tyre, 3 old tyres, and now 15 minutes in the race to try and use a single tyre's worth of grip.
I'll tell you what, Jordan Caruso had a very slow pit stop. He spent 40 seconds in pit lane. You look at the average time that most of the other cars have spent in the lane, and it's been around 33 or 34 seconds. So Caruso actually gave up more than 6 seconds to Job Stewart, and what was a lead of around 8 seconds is now down to less than 2 seconds. So it was just as well for Jordan Caruso that he'd established such a big lead on the track, because he lost a lot of that margin during that pit stop.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the little stop times right now, and it ended up 6.2 seconds lost in the pit stop alone. So that doesn't factor in the lane transit time. That is purely when he was stopped in the pit box itself. So that is a big, big time loss there for Jordan Caruso. And that has now just allowed Job Stewart to close up. And the bad thing is, Job Stewart can see Jordan Caruso clearly, and we all know when a racing driver can see their prey in front of them, it's just more motivation to put the hammer down.
So everybody's now made one pit stop. We've got just under 13 minutes to go. We're expecting that everybody is going to have to visit the pits again for a splash of fuel. And I wonder if, seeing as everybody has pitted on pretty much the same lap, certainly out of all of the leading contenders, that we'll see everybody come in at around the same time for their second pit stop as well.
Well, assuming they can go 10 minutes and it's a 25-minute race, that means that there's 5-minute leeway in this second pit stop where drivers could come in. So if you were to pit after the 15-minute mark in this race, in theory, that would mean you could make it to the end of the race on a tank of fuel. So for someone like Job Stewart, of course, the original strategy would possibly be to undercut the driver in front of Jordan Caruso and gain time that way. The issue is, though, with the pack so dense and so full of drivers, you're going to come out in so much traffic. I think that's why these drivers have gone out as long as they can on a tank of fuel, because putting yourself back out into traffic around a circuit like Laguna Seca in cars that are relatively hard to pass would just cost you way too much time.
I agree with you 100% there, Bo. I think that the early pit stop is going to put you back in traffic and going to cost you a lot of time, so you want to leave your final pit stop as late as you possibly can. We're right on board with Oscar Target, who's in behind Dylan Golson at the moment. Oscar Target, one of the young drivers. We saw him competing in the Speed Cafe E Series as well. Oh, that was Jeff Rahali, who was just disappearing out to the left-hand side of the shot. So he's had a mistake and an off-track excursion, and that's seen him falling outside the top 10, and in fact he's heading back into the pits as well. Here's how it happened, coming out of the corkscrew and then down into the next left-hander. He's lost the rear end and managed to keep it off the walls. But it's a pretty awkward position to try and do a U-turn. It looks like just about misses getting collected by any other cars.
Yeah, these cars, of course, are very, very compact, so seeing out of the windows is a little bit difficult, especially if you don't have the monitor size where you can see the full peripheral of what's going on around you. So for these drivers, you have seen a couple of slightly clumsy rejoins in this race so far, so not ideal. But we're going back up to our top 5 now. We're on board with Mr. Glenn Postlethwaite steering at the back of James Golding, who is one of the fastest cars on track at the moment. The issue is, I just want to point out, your race leader last lap around 1.6 seconds faster than anybody else in your top 5 currently. So Jordan Caruso applying a lot of pressure at the moment, but right now it's Glenn Postlethwaite seeing what he can do and how he can size up the car in front, sponsored by Lego all over. But of course, James Golding, very, very talented, knows exactly how to build a margin to the car behind.
He's done a good job of coming to grips with these cars, Jordan Caruso, because he's got pace to burn at the moment. We look at Glenn Postlethwaite, one of the Synergy sim racing drivers, trying to keep up with James Golding at the moment, who's there in 4th position. Things have just settled down a bit at the moment after all of the chaos that we had in the early stages. Everybody's been relatively well behaved the last couple of laps, or have I spoken too soon?
Ruben Goodles has been there for a little while. He's not having much luck in getting this car spun around, and I think he has now finally decided to bring this car into the pit lane to tire it. But it hasn't been the race for him. Of course, he did actually get a penalty, I believe, for his contact earlier in the race where he sent one of the drivers around at turn number 4. So for Ruben, it's not been one of those nights, and definitely a very stark comparison to how his teammates' race has gone.
So 9 minutes to go. We're inside the window now where you can pit and make it home to the end based on fuel range. As we were talking about before, not a good idea if you're in the lead pack because you're going to come out in traffic. If you're a bit further down the order, though, and you don't have anything to lose, it's potentially a risk worth taking. As we see, Glenn Postlethwaite into the back of James Golding, who was on his way into the pits. So James Golding is going to be the first of the drivers in that front-running pack to come in. No, because Jordan Caruso's in as well.
Yep, race leader has come in from the race lead, which I find extremely surprising. And he is up on the jacks, taking tyres as well. So what is happening here for Jordan Caruso? He cannot afford to take tyres, and this could be a disaster for him. Because look at the amount of time he's lost. He's going to come out behind James Golding. So Jordan Caruso in the pits has just gone and thrown away this race win.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? So apart from the fact that he's now going to come back out onto the track in traffic, he's just cost himself some extra time in the pits by taking a fresh set of tyres. It's going to be a long stop. He will have been in the pits for more than a minute by the time this stop is complete. He's still stuck there. He's still stationary. This is murdering Jordan Caruso's race.
Well, he's going to struggle to even finish top 15 at this rate. And sadly, I think what this might have done is hand things into a very nice position indeed for Job Stewart to win 2 races in a row. Of course, I know that is the ultimate commentator's curse, but unless Blake Purdy behind can challenge, I think Job Stewart has just found himself in a very nice spot indeed. He comes into the pits. Does he know not to make the same mistakes Jordan Caruso has?
Well, we wait and see, don't we? Wow, that's a pretty creative pit entry there from Blake Purdy as well. Glenn Postlethwaite now comes in as well. We had a shot there just before as well of Jordan Mulak getting the pit entry all wrong and almost fencing it on the way into the pits. So Mulak lost some time there as well. But Jordan Caruso has come out all the way down in 24th position after his pit stop.
Yeah, so that is going to be a very, very long recovery drive from here. And the issue is for a long recovery drive, he's actually only got 6.5 minutes to make it happen in. So Jordan's going to be ruining that mistake for quite some time, I would have to imagine, as most of our drivers have not pitted just yet. A lot are waiting until the very end to take their final pit stop so they can avoid all that traffic. So right now, race leader goes to Hayden Veld.
James Golding will effectively be in second position once the pit stop shuffle cycles out. So he's the second car behind Job Stewart that's taken both pit stops. So he's actually made a net gain. He's jumped ahead of Blake Purdy in that round of pit stops. But look at Purdy challenging on the back of James Golding, who just got balked a bit there, heading up the hill through turn number 5 by would have been Oscar Target, the next car ahead of him. So this is a big battle at the moment between James Golding and Blake Purdy for what will be second position overall in this race.
Yep, and they are fighting hard over it. And you can see the different driving styles as well between the two. Going through the corkscrew, of course, we had the drive behind really just opening up the corner so much more compared to James Golding. So really interesting to see how they go as they have to negotiate a little bit of traffic with Oscar Target, who does get out of the way. But Blake Purdy and James Golding extracting speed right now in 2 very unique ways to the car.
So Hayden Veld, Matt Morris, Mario Vartanian all get to pit at the moment. Dylan Golson's just come down pit lane with his pit stop. Those cars that are out in the lead and haven't stopped yet, based on the approximately 10-minute fuel range that we were talking about, are going to have to stop soon. And Blake Purdy has got a big hit up the back from Oscar Target there. Oscar Target out of sequence, of course, being yet to take his second pit stop. But look at this, just in the braking zone for turn number 2, Oscar Target's misjudged and he's run hard into the rear bumper of Blake Purdy.
So I'm just looking at the fuel numbers at the moment. We're looking at 3.5 laps remaining for our race leader, currently Hayden Veld. And he's about to start his 7th lap on a tank of fuel. If he's been able to fuel save this just a little bit, or if anyone in our top 3 currently has been able to fuel save just a little bit, is there the potential one of them could make it home on their single pit stop? It will be extremely tight. But with how the clock is ticking down and how the race pace of this race has ended up being run, it has ended up at a point where these drivers have got themselves very, very close. Hayden Veld decides not to bother. Matt Morris decides not to bother and excuse everything I just said, because Mario Vartanian also dives into the pits. Job Stewart will take over as race leader.
Well, that answers that question, doesn't it? So they obviously have worked out that they will not have enough fuel to get to the end. Just a question being raised in the background as well by our producer, Jay Kennedy. Does James Golding have enough fuel? And the reason that question's been asked is because his last stop was quite short compared to the others, but not only that, he stopped a lap earlier than the likes of Job Stewart and Blake Purdy as well. So James Golding could potentially be a bit fuel compromised in the last few laps of this race.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of our pit stops we have seen have been around the 7 to 8 second mark, whereas you look at James Golding and he's standing at just 4.1 seconds, so almost 2 seconds faster than, or almost 3 seconds faster than your average pit stop over the length of this race. And you can see he has begun to back the pace off just a little bit. There is only 2.5 laps remaining in this race, but that 2.5 laps could feel like an eternity for James if that fuel counter is looking a little bit too low.
So Blake Purdy here fighting it out with Glenn Postlethwaite for the final spot on the podium. We saw Blake Purdy off the road at turn 2 after contact for another car a bit earlier on. And he was up challenging James Golding for second. He's now struggling to hold on to third because he's got Glenn Postlethwaite breathing down his neck. And I reckon Golding might be out of fuel here. Look at him shortcutting across the circuit. Just trying to save a bit of track distance, but yeah, I reckon James Golding might struggle to get to the end here.
Yeah, absolutely. If he's already having to resort to such drastic measures, then I don't like his chances at all, especially with Purdy and Postlethwaite right behind. Never mind, they're ahead. They've already passed him, so second and third now fighting it out to turn 1. A big lockup from Glenn Postlethwaite there. A massive moment there. Lucky not to get into the back of Blake Purdy and change the results once again. You can see in the background James Golding shortcutting just about every bit of cornering ability there is in that Volkswagen Beetle. If he has the ability to use the track, even if it's not even tarmac, he's going to use it right now, and he's using the gravel, grass, just about everything. So that is a very tough situation to be, and I think right now it may be game over. He's going even slower and even slower with every passing moment. Sadly for James Golding, he was up some 26 positions, but I think the only positions he's gaining now is going to be in the wrong direction.
If this was the last lap, he'd just about make it, but just with the way that the time is going to fall when the race leader crosses the start-finish line, there will be one more lap to go after this one. So James Golding might actually have to come in for a splash of fuel just to make sure that he can get home. Tumbling down the order in the Lego car. And he's completely out of fuel now. And yet he's not going to come into the pits. He's going to try and persevere with it, or else pull off the racetrack altogether.
I appreciate the commitment, absolutely, from James Golding, but it's yeah, not going to work out for him, especially if the car is already coughing. And I think from there, it's going to be very, very difficult because, of course, this circuit has a lot of elevations. There's a lot of uphill. So it's not really a point where you can really save and just coast around unless you can maybe get to the top of the corkscrew and can roll down the entire length of the hill. But even then, that's quite an ask indeed.
So we are now on the final lap, and Job Stewart looking very good for back-to-back race victories tonight. So picked up victory in race number 1 and looking to add to the tally with another victory in race number 2. And James Golding has now officially retired from the race, but here he is, Job Stewart. Great performance from the Pursuit sim racing driver. He was the class of the field in race number 1, and he's going to make it back-to-back victories tonight in week 9, season 4 of the Just Ended iRacing series, with another race win in race number 2, and by a big margin as well. 8 seconds back to Blake Purdy in second position, who just holds out Glenn Postlethwaite in third spot.
Yeah, a great effort from your top 3 there. All of them, you have to say, deserve it. A great job also by Steve Jansen, who comes home in 4th place. Hayden Veld I believe will come home in 5th place as well. So a very mixed up top 5 coming from very different portions of the grid. Of course, you had Blake Purdy, who started the race in 10th place. Oh, sorry, in 3rd place. He'd finish in 2nd. And then you look just behind Glenn Postlethwaite, had to move up 7 spots to where he finished. Hayden Veld up 15 spots from where he would eventually finish. So a lot of chopping and changing in the race, and that's exactly what we like to see in Just Send It, is a whole ton of overtaking.
There was plenty of that tonight, plenty of big sends, that was for sure. And a lot of drivers coming from deep in the pack to score some respectable results as well. As we say, Job Stewart in celebration mode to finish off the evening's proceedings. And what that means, of course, is that he will extend his unofficial championship lead. There's not actually a championship per se for Just Send It, but we do keep an unofficial point score. Here's confirmation of your results. Stewart, your winner ahead of Purdy, Postlethwaite, Steve Jansen in 4th. Back to Hayden Veld, Matt Morris, Kobe Williams, Jordan Mulak in 8th position, Dylan Golson 9th, and Lockie Hughes completing the top 10.
In 11th place, finishing some 33 seconds off the race lead after a 57-second pit stop, is Jordan Caruso. What a night it could have been for him. Sadly, was not to be. Emerson Harvey would wrap things up in position number 12 ahead of Brenton West, Harvey Price, and Tyson McAvoy, your top 15. Mark Wicks could round things out in 16th ahead of Rob Crisdale, James Close, Justin Howe, and Jeff Rahali, the last of your drivers on the lead lap.
Back to James Golding in 21st to retirement, out of fuel there at the end. Ryan Ullman in 22nd. Back to Aidan Brand, Oscar Target, Brock Feeney was a lap down in 25th. Ian Quast, Mario Vartanian, Christina Nazarick, Eddie Beswick, and the ever-entertaining Mitchell McLeod back in 30th spot.
Ruben Goodall would wrap things up in 31st. They had Gordon Smith, Harrison Dengate, Cam Dance, and Wilhelm Leighton as well in position number 35. Damien Westbrook in 36th ahead of Daniel Aish, Jackson Barry, Andy Carey, and Lockie Dalton in the top 40.
And back then to our final finishers, Noah Healy, Michael Smith crossing, Marcello Rivera, Brenton Hobson, who was on his roof in that race, David Death, Joel Chig of the Zira, Byron Phillips, Simon Black, and Hayden Felici classified way back in 49th position and 17 laps down, not being actually classified as a race finisher. Well, there we go. That completes all of the action for Week 9, Season 4 of the Just Send It iRacing series. We'll be back same time, same channel, next Tuesday night for another evening of Just Send It. You've been watching it right here on the SimSpeed television network, with thanks to our producer, Jay Kennedy. This is Bo Hewitt and Lockie Mansell. Sorry, Bo Albert and Lockie Mansell signing off. See you next week. Bye for now.
Fantastic. This is GT racing right now. He's got traction. He's got everything outside of both of them. Maloney. Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top. Oh my God. Oh, big crash. Oh my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys I want to make their way through the field very quickly. Oh, there we go. Oh no. That's massive. This is it. This is over. I can't believe this. Oh my God.
God, what?